Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Paperbacks Galore and my name is Angela. It is the start of Black History Month and I wanted to pick two Black classics to read that I had on my shelves. So throughout the course of this vlog, I'm going to be reading Kindred by Octavia E. Butler, which is considered to be a sci-fi classic, and Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, which is just a regular old fiction classic. I'm going to be sharing my experience reading these two books over the course of this vlog, and this is a no spoiler vlog. So if you haven't gotten to these two books yet, you can still watch and hear my thoughts on them and then go read them yourself. Okay, so since I am a mood reader, I think I need to read the first few pages of both of these to see which one I want to start with, but I'm super excited. I haven't read any classics so far this year, and I'm just really looking forward to something with like brilliant writing. Like, I'm excited to read a book and just be like, this is brilliant. And I think I'm gonna get that with both of these. Yeah, so I'm gonna read the first few pages and report back. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, I only read the first page of this book, but I know I have to start with this one, and it's Kindred. All I know about this is that there is a Black woman living in the late 20th century, and she kind of inexplicably is taken back to the time of slavery and kind of just like shows up on this plantation, and obviously that's a really dangerous place to be. So it sounds absolutely terrifying. I assume she's gonna have to escape or try to survive. I don't know if she's gonna be going back and forth in time or if she's just going to be like on the plantation for a certain period of time, and if we're going to get flashbacks, maybe it's just all going to be chronological. I don't know. So that's literally all I know. I've never heard anyone give Octavia E. Butler a negative review, so I'm super excited to start this, and I'll give you guys an update later on. So I have read the first 30 pages of Kindred, and I feel qualified now to give a better synopsis. So basically we have this woman, Dana. I think the modern portion of this book is set in the 70s because it was published in 1979, so that just makes sense. And she and her husband are in California. They are currently unpacking boxes in their new home, and suddenly Dana feels very dizzy and kind of discombobulated, and then moments later she is like in the wilderness by a river, and there's a little boy drowning in the river. So her brain just kind of is like, okay, go save the child. So she goes and saves the child, and his mother is like on the shore crying and like kind of suspicious of Dana, but Dana's like, let me save your child. So she gives him like mouth to mouth and resuscitates him, and then his father shows up with a rifle, and Dana is like terrified. And then seconds later she's back in her home in California in like a different spot in the room, and her husband is like, what's going on? Like, you were gone for like 10 seconds. And Dana is like soaking wet and covered in mud. And so we have this really weird scenario of her time traveling. And then it actually happens again soon after, when this little boy is in danger in another circumstance, and she expects to just kind of go back like that when he's safe. But this time, even after he's safe, she's still there. So it seems like these visits are going to get progressively longer. I'm finding the writing style to be really simple but effective, and I appreciate that because often when you read a classic, it's a lot of brain effort to just figure out what is being said. So I think it's interesting that this book is going to be more focused on like plot and themes rather than like, you know, the flowery writing. It's really, really readable. I read 30 pages like way more quickly than I did like other books that I've read recently, so I'm enjoying this. I think my main question for this book going forward is Octavia Butler ever going to explain the sci-fi elements, or is it just gonna kind of be like, yeah, she's time traveling? You know what I mean? Like, is there gonna be any sort of semi-logical or sci-fi explanation to this, or are we supposed to just like suspend our disbelief and think like, yeah, there's time traveling? I don't know. I don't even know what I want, but that, I think, is what I'm really curious about. I'm also really curious about how she's going to survive. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned this, but this little boy is from the antebellum South. So it's 1815 where she is. And he is the son of a plantation owner who has like 30-something enslaved people living on this plantation. And she's a black woman. So there's really not much of a more dangerous place for her to land in. And I am very interested in the kind of like tense survival moments that we're gonna get. It's just such an interesting premise, and I'm already like scared for her. I mean, obviously, but I feel like this book is gonna be like, almost feel like a thriller, because you're just like on the edge of your seat hoping that she's gonna be okay. And yeah, I'm happy that I'm reading this, and I can't wait to dive in. Hi y'all, so it's the next morning. I just filmed my January wrap-up video and put some sparkles and makeup on my face. Today I don't have to go to work. I do have grad school class at 6:30, so I need to spend my day doing some homework, but I'm gonna try to fit some reading time in because I really need to know what's gonna happen with Dana. I need to know how she's gonna get home. I need to know how long she's gonna be there. I need to know how the other people on the plantation are gonna react to seeing her, because so far only the little boy seems to actually know that she's an outsider who's come in, and I'm just like on the edge of my seat. Hi guys, so it's Saturday. I have a rare day off. We just took our cats to the vet, which was a challenge because they really did not like being in those carriers. But right now we're gonna go to two of our local libraries, return some stuff, get some stuff, and then later today I will give you an update on what I've read in Kindred. Okay, library haul. We got the Blu-ray of the Poirot series, which if you haven't watched it is so good. It's like every episode is like an adaptation of a full Agatha Christie novel. Then we have Past Lives, which is a movie that I've heard is good. And then what I really came here for is The Mysterious Case of the Alperton Angels by Janice Hallett, which is like a mixed media mystery novel that just came out in the US, but it's been out in the UK for a while. And I've heard really good things about this one in particular. I read The Appeal and I really liked it, and I've heard this one is even better. So I'll be reading this month. Hi, so it's the day after I said I would update you. I'm sorry. Yesterday was Saturday. Tommy and I ended up going out to get Mexican food for dinner, and then we kind of had a chill night in, played a lot of this game called It Takes Two, which is really fun, and one of the only video games that I can actually play with Tommy, so that's fun. I will update you now. I am currently about 146 pages into Kindred, and I was at work pretty much all day, but I don't have work tomorrow. I don't have anything tomorrow. So I'm thinking I'm going to sit down and try to read the last like 120 pages in one go, which is always my favorite way to finish a book anyway. I'm going to give my thoughts on Kindred. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I'm going to kind of like vaguely share some thoughts. So all that I knew going into it was that the main character was going to be traveling back in time, but my dryer just started going. Sorry if you can hear that. There's actually been an instance where her husband was actually able to travel back with her to this, antebellum time period. I think it's like 1815 at one point. So he's actually there with her at one point. And it's really interesting because he's white. And so obviously the situation is completely different for him because he is the person with, who's safe and who has all the power, and he can kind of try to protect her. And there's been some really interesting commentary on like how easy it is for her and everyone else to kind of fall into this system, to kind of like accept slavery and just kind of like accept that this is how it is and just kind of blend into this system. And I think that's a really interesting commentary. And we're also getting some random flashbacks to her relationship with Kevin, her husband, and like how their relationship started. And it's just, I have some thoughts. I'm thinking that maybe Kevin's role in this book is going to be bigger than I anticipated, but I won't tell you what Kevin's role ends up being because you should just read this book if you haven't. But if you know, you know. And I'm really interested to see how Kevin contributes to the plot overall. Yeah, hopefully I can finish the book tonight and give you my final thoughts. Good morning. It's the next day. I know I said last night I was gonna sit down and finish Kindred. I did end up reading for a while, but it was honestly making me really sad before bed. And obviously, Kindred is a very sad book. It's not supposed to be a happy book, but I was just like, you know what? I'm gonna wake up tomorrow morning. I'm gonna read this with a cup of tea, with the daylight, coming in through the windows. And I finished it this morning. So I'm here to share my final thoughts on the first book in this vlog. I'm finding the hardest thing about vlogging is sharing my thoughts on books without spoiling it, because I'm not really sure how much is a spoiler, what's a spoiler. Like if I tell you something that happens that's not in the synopsis, is that a spoiler if it happens within the first 40 pages? Anyway, my final rating for Kindred is 4.5 stars. Why wasn't it 5 stars? I don't know exactly. It's just when a book is 5 stars, it has that feeling of like, wow, that most books don't get. I'm trying this year to be a lot more honest with my ratings. I think in past years, I've been kind of hesitant to give books lower ratings because it feels mean, but it's not mean. It's just honest, and that's what book reviewers do, and I always appreciate when book reviewers actually give honest reviews. So 4.5 stars is still an excellent rating. I really enjoyed Kindred. I was so fascinated by all of the new elements and little twists that Octavia E. Butler was adding into the story. I think this is such an interesting perspective because this was written in the 1970s, which is obviously not a time when like everything is okay for Black people. It's still, things are not okay for Black people. Like there is still so much systemic racism and white supremacy issues, and even in 2024, let alone 1976, but then let alone 1815, 1820. So it's just really, it was just harrowing. Like that's a really good word. It was harrowing. This is considered to be a science fiction novel, but I almost felt like it was a historical horror novel. And what makes it so crazy is that the horror, it was just like real life things that happened to enslaved people. Like the only really supernatural element to this was the time travel. Everything else was true to, historical facts that we have about what happened on plantations. So it really did feel like a horror novel. The way that the ending connects to the prologue is incredible. So the prologue, the very first thing that you read in this book is something that happens. You get a little piece of what happens way at the end of the novel, and the way that you are just kind of wondering throughout the whole book how this is going to tie in, and the way that it does is just brilliant. I will say, I think the thing that is keeping me from this being a 5-star incredible book is that I wasn't necessarily in awe at the writing style. I was in awe of her craft and her commentary and the way that she was writing her characters, the way that the story was moving. The writing itself wasn't gorgeous or fascinating or drawing me in the way that other books written Toni Morrison I'm thinking of. The writing style for me just wasn't incredible. So I think that little piece of it was missing for me, but overall, really excellent work of fiction. I'm actually gonna go read the reader's guide in the back. I think I mentioned it, but I'm gonna be reading Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin. All I know about this book is that it's about Americans living in Paris in the 50s. I believe our main character is a Black man, and I think it is a kind of tragic love story between two queer men. I believe they're both American. I'm not sure. I think it's going to be very sad. I think it's going to be beautifully written. I've read a short story from James Baldwin before. I think it's called Sunny's Blues or something. I'll put the title here. I read that story in college and I was just struck by how beautifully he writes. So I'm hoping this is going to be something that blows me away. Okay, so it's later in the evening. I have read the first 10 pages of Giovanni's Room. I know 10 pages isn't a lot, but I have some homework to do and I'm just kind of distracted by that, and I really want to savor this book because I can already tell that the writing in this is going to be delectable. I'm going to just want to savor it and underline it and reflect on it and appreciate his talent and the beautiful sentences and already the complexities of human emotion and how he writes about it, where other authors might just say that it made the character sad or it made them confused. Like, the sentences that he's weaving are so unique. Even the first line isn't necessarily like flowery or like, you know, purple prose, but I really liked the first line of the book. It's, I stand at the window of this great house in the south of France as night falls, the night which is leading me to the most terrible morning of my life. I need to know more. So far, this first 10 pages has been from the perspective of this white man, which was kind of surprising because I was kind of expecting it to be a black character because James Baldwin is black, so I'm wondering if... So it's not from Giovanni's perspective. He has made a reference to Giovanni. I don't actually think we've learned this character's name yet. If we have, that's my bad, but I haven't seen it yet. And so far, he has been reflecting on his first ever encounter with another boy in his youth, in his teen years. The first time he ever had like kind of the realization that he was attracted to other men, other boys. And it was really, really beautifully written, so fascinating. I'm already seeing that James Baldwin just is brilliant. Just the way that he writes about people and like their thoughts and their emotions is just incredible. So I'm super excited to read this. Tomorrow I'm actually getting my hair dyed blondish, I don't know, blonde highlights or whatever. I've never dyed my hair before. So I am anticipating being at the salon for like 2.5 hours. So I'm gonna bring this with me. Okay, hi, hello. I got my highlights done. I'm not really sure how I feel about them. I hated them at first, and then I was just sort of like, they're okay. And I had a few moments where I was like, okay, but I don't know. But I did read about 60 pages in the midst of getting my highlights done. So I read to page 80, and my thoughts are a little mixed. There are certainly some really beautifully written lines and really interesting and complex sentiments about like human emotion that I would never have thought up myself. But on the flip side of that, there are some things that he's saying that I'm like, what? Like, I'm like, I don't know if like I'm not getting it, or like if I disagree with what you're saying, or if I just don't know what you mean by that. So it's not giving me like, oh my god, this is such an incredible classic, I'm obsessed with it vibes. It's giving like, I appreciate it and I like it, but I don't love it. So I'll probably just update you when I finish this book. I'm about to go out to dinner with my husband and his family, and I will update you when I can. Hopefully it won't take me too long to finish this book because there are so many great books that I want to read this month, and this one is like less than 200 pages, so interesting length. Hello, so it has been a couple days since I last updated you. I just finished Giovanni's Room. I sat down and read the last like 70-ish pages all in one go, and I'm really glad I did that. My experience with this book was I had moments where I was like, oh my god, the writing is incredible, this is amazing. There were other times where I was wondering why we were focusing on some things rather than others. There was a lot of this book that was about like these older, wealthy gay men that were kind of taking advantage of younger, poor, queer, I guess I should say queer men. And there was a lot of focus on those interactions, which I understand, but I felt like the connection between David and Giovanni was a little glossed over at times. Like, there was one point where we were told that they had been spending, you know, these weeks together in Giovanni's room, and I just wish that there had been more time spent actually showing us their connection, just because I think it would have been more powerful for me when we get to the points of the book that are more sad and tragic. So I was having a bit of mixed feelings around page like 100, but then the last 70 pages that I read today, there was some really, really interesting commentary on gender roles and the ways that different characters in this book are trapped by the gender roles that they feel they have to fit into, which, I mean, it's the 1950s, so they almost really do have to fit into them. And there's even a female character who kind of comments on that. So it's just interesting to see different ways in which characters are trapped by those gender roles, and also the kind of internalized homophobia and how that presents itself in different characters, especially David, who's the narrator of this book. And it's interesting because Giovanni, you know, he isn't perfectly liberated and accepting, but I think he is a lot less fearful of who he is than our narrator David. So overall, I'm giving this novel 4 stars. I thought it was brilliant in some places, and in others I felt a little bit confused as to why we were focusing on this. There were some lines and some moments where I just felt like I had no idea what he was trying to say. And obviously James Baldwin is a brilliant writer, so my review of his book means almost nothing. This is not taking away from James Baldwin's brilliance. This is just to say that this wasn't a perfect 5-star, knocked it out of the park read for me, and that's okay. It was a 4-star. I may reread this someday. James Baldwin has other novels, of course, that I would love to get to. Especially, I think he has one called Go Tell It on the Mountain that's about religion. But I just want to say the fact that this came out in the 50s, I'm very interested to read about how this book was perceived when it came out, because this is like, man, people don't even get this stuff today in 2024. Like, there are still tons of people who would read this book and have problems with it. And the fact that this came out in the 50s, I'm so curious. So definitely revolutionary for its time. And by the way, if you start reading this book, I saw another booktuber who DNF'd this because they noticed some like misogyny, and they were like, oh, well, I'm not going to read this. James Baldwin is not a misogynist. So if you read like a suspicious kind of line at the beginning, keep reading, because it's very obvious that James Baldwin himself is writing these characters as having some misogynistic traits, and there's commentary about that later on in the book. It's not just casual misogyny dropped into a book like is so often done in the 50s, you know. It's James Baldwin is too brilliant for that. So don't be discouraged if you start reading this book and you're like, that was a weird line. James Baldwin is cool. So if you've read any of these 2 classics that I read, let me grab Kindred. If you've read either of these or both of these, let me know your thoughts on them, which one you preferred. Let me know some other classics that you love and would recommend based on my thoughts about these. But thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much, and I hope you have a lovely week. Bye!